Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Henry Gilroy, co-executive producer of Star Wars Rebels. You're listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Welcome, brave traveler, to Aggressive Negotiations, the Star Wars podcast on the Nerd Party Network that welcomes you and would love for you to join us on our journey through the Star Wars galaxy to every corner of this circular galaxy. So I don't know how we could have corners, but we do. And I am one of your hosts, Jedi Master John Mills. And with me is my dear friend, the esteemed, accomplished Jedi Master, Matthew Rushing. Jedi Master Rushing, what esteemed knowledge will you bring to us today?
Well, the pleasure is all mine to be here, of course, and I'm just really excited. I just couldn't believe you got so esoteric just right at the beginning. You know, if they're, you know, the universe has a round shape, how are their corners? You know, it's a great question that I don't think we can cover in this episode. But yeah, absolutely. So my knowledge is, thank you so much for joining us. And please, follow us wherever you can find us. You know, we're on Twitter, Instagram, we're all over the place. So on Twitter, you can find us at the Jedi Masters. That's the show account. And we would love for you to follow us over there. In fact, if you're listening to this show, please do follow us. You can find the entire network at Join Nerd Party. We're on Instagram at The Nerd Party. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party. And then there's thenerdparty.com, where not only can you check out all the shows that we've got going on, John, but you can go over to the contact section and you can send us an email as well if you would like to talk to us. And you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, too. So if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, all the places that you get your podcasts, you can find Aggressive Negotiations. Make sure that you are subscribed. That way you get the show as soon as it drops. And if you're like this listener and you left us a little review there on Apple Podcasts, we'll read that out on the show, because those really do help people find the show and help the show grow. And so Daniel T. Moore wrote, "Great companion to The Mandalorian." So apparently they've been listening to our commentaries there, John. They gave us 5 stars, and they said, "The hosts offer a lot of great enthusiasm and insightful commentary into the episodes of The Mandalorian." So thank you so much for listening to our most recent episodes and giving us that review. It means a lot to us that you would spend the time to do that. That's great.
It's beyond great. I'm really glad that our Mandalorian Season 1 episode commentaries resonated. We do have other commentaries that we've done throughout the history of the show. We have had some magnificent movie commentaries. We've also had some tremendous interviews with creators behind the scenes for Star Wars. And we would love, if you're brand new to the show and you found us because of the Mandalorian commentaries, please, by all means, go through our past catalog. Check it out. We do. We have a lot of really fun commentaries, and actually, we did a movie-by-movie analysis of things, some time back. So be sure to check those sorts of things out. And on top of all of that, do go to thenerdparty.com and check out those other shows that are there, because we do try to appeal on the network to, all of the different walks of fandom that are out there, because Matt and I, we love more than just Star Wars. This is our great passion. This is our driving passion, but we listen to other stuff too. So go ahead and check stuff out over on thenerdparty.com. But all of that said, we arrive here with an interesting topic, I think, because somehow this has not been one that we have done. We've done many shows, and somehow we haven't stumbled across this before now. And we're going to be talking about droids, our favorites, as they have appeared in the Star Wars lexicon, canon, whatever you want to call it. And so the thing is, Matt, what I want to throw out there first before we start talking about is of course, we're not going to be ranking necessarily like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing. We're going to be, it's going to be a little bit more of a discussion. But what I want to do is I want to ask you, do you think Star Wars is a thing that can work without droids? do you think, and let me explain, Star Trek existed without droid characters for quite a long time throughout its history, but droids have always been a part of Star Wars. Do you think that is just a part of its fabric? And if so, what is it about droids you think that are uniquely Star Wars? What makes them work within this context?
I think the thing that makes droids work, and it's funny because I was just doing an interview over on a Literary Treks with one of the authors, and we kind of talked about holograms and kind of mentioned droids a little bit and talked a little bit about that idea. And one of the things about droids that she mentioned, and I thought was really smart, is, we think of droids as friends. And I think part of that is that droids in many ways are kind of like pets that are also tools. And so I think that's the thing that really makes droids special and feel so integral to the Star Wars universe, is that they're basically mechanical pets that help you out of jams, because they got all these cool tools and they help fix stuff. And it's like, it's this strange combination of a tool and a pet, and I think that's one of the things that always helps make, for the most part, droids, the question of like sentience and stuff, not really enter your mind because of the way that they've been treated and the way that I just generally think about them. And part of that, Dave Filoni talked about if R2-D2 is the dog of the family, then Chopper's the cat, the personality-wise. And I think that's the other thing that you kind of get with these characters, is they have these personalities that kind of mimic those type of things. And then you have your characters like C-3PO and other stuff where they can converse with you and talk with you, in a way that we truly understand, and it brings them to life in that way. And that's, I think, really where that friend part comes in, because they can truly feel like a friend. So yeah, there's just this unique combination of things, I think, that George was able to come up with that really took these characters to a whole new level and really made them into a classification all their own. They're droids. They're not robots, right? We called them a new thing too, and so they truly are all their own, I think, in science fiction. And that makes them special, and it's given us all an affinity for them that, it's the thing that I think like Pixar's really good with, where you bring inanimate objects to life in a way that makes you feel for them, and so there's just something that the combination of the way they're treated by other characters, the way that they behave, and then the actual function of the way they've been brought to life on screen by those that have brought them to life, whether it's like Anthony Daniels or Kenny Baker specifically for our two original droids. It's just a special alchemy that I don't know if has really ever been replicated in any other show in the way that we get in Star Wars.
I agree naturally with a lot of what you're saying. What I find is interesting about the droids is that, intentionally or not, they come along at a time, and when you really think about it, to touch on your idea of how we approach them differently, robots were considered just robots when Star Wars comes around in the 1970s. There's a more mechanical engineering thought process behind it. That's why we have so many switches, no touch screens. There's not the computer revolution has not happened at a personal scale the way that it was going to in the mid 80s. So Star Wars is right before that. Lucas finds a way to create these two characters who are endearing, who could be companions, and who also, and I know this is going to be an uncomfortable way to say it, but who also can be servants without the human connotation that goes along with that. an audience is going to be more accepting of a servant character, especially at that time, and arguably now too, with the way that we treat our Internet of Things devices, our smart light bulbs, our phones, and those sorts of things. There's a human separation there. But at the same time, what's interesting, and I hadn't really thought about it till you started talking about how Chopper is the cat, R2 is the dog, 3PO is more of the person. The idea that built in, intentionally or not, as the droid, the droid character base expands, there's more of an exploratory sort of thing that sets up almost an evolutionary sense of the droid at its baseline. Because you have droids that are at one end of the scale in terms of what type of speech they have, how intelligent they are, just like they're like the animals of the droid kingdom. And then you have the intelligent droids. And then you have, when we get to the prequels, and then finally when we get to Solo, we see a more modern appreciation for what we think droids are going to be in our lives. And so there's this really interesting, I think, just evolutionary principle baked into the whole concept from the start that I don't think was necessarily, in Lucas's mind where he said, I'm going to make these two characters and they're going to become my evolution. But at the same time, even R2 and 3PO have an evolutionary principle to them, because 3PO goes from, I'm just an interpreter, I'm not very good at telling stories, to, in Return of the Jedi, telling the story that wins over the Ewoks that topples the Empire. So you even have character development with these quote-unquote inanimate objects. And so I just think it's what you're saying there. I think that there's also this evolutionary principle baked into it. But so we've set the terms here of, why we think droids work so well within Star Wars. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, we're not going to do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 sort of thing. But when I throw out there favorite droids, what's the first one? The first name that comes to your mind?
Yeah, honestly, for me, I love K2SO. I fell in love with that droid in Rogue One. I felt like the humor with him worked perfectly. I thought the execution of the droid, just the look and the feel of him was phenomenal. Even just the way the eyes move is incredible. And then I really loved the idea of this redeemed droid, right? The idea of, Cassian reprogramming him. And that part of the reason that he's kind of special and he has this personality is the reprogramming. He lacks maybe some of the filters that you might get if, of course, you were just a programmed Imperial droid who would never talk back to anybody or give any kind of opinion. And I just, as a character, I will say this too. When he dies in that movie, it's as moving as anybody else in the movie dying. The way that he sacrifices himself for Jyn and Cassian so they can give them more time. It's so beautiful, and it's kind of what Star Wars is all about. This droid becomes one of our selfless heroes and a model for selfless behavior in the most beautiful way. In the most war movie of Star Wars movies, he truly gives the sacrificial hero's death, to make sure that they can get across the line, the kind of thing. And so just a great character, a really incredible performance too. And part of that is just the merging of all the technologies that brought him to life. And that droid is never on screen, but I never believe he's not there too. So technologically, it's another jump forward in a digital character who I don't not believe is not just sitting next to Cassian, or it's really I think it's a technological achievement, but it's just a fantastic character in and of itself, and one of the droids that I feel like has the most to do in any of the Star Wars movies. So yeah, I love him. So I could go on more, but yeah, that's for me. That's when I first think of droids these days. It's K2SO.
Interesting, because and this is probably just because I'm so old school and stuff like that. I'm going to leapfrog past the first name that I think of is always going to be R2D2. And I'm sure I've mentioned this before. I
get what you're saying, because I'll be honest.
Yeah.
It's the same thing for me. I think everybody, the moment you say droid, R2D2 pops into your mind. As it's R2D2.
Well, I mean, I think that I have a love affair with R2D2 as a character the same way that Lucas does, where I'll never forget during the episode 3 commentary track where Lucas talks about the fact that people kept trying to talk him out of having so much R2 stuff at the beginning. And he said, no, this is for the R2 fans. And I'm the biggest R2 fan there is. So I get to have my R2 stuff. And I'm paraphrasing there, but R2 owns one of the most emotionally satisfying moments in any Star Wars film for me. And I'm pretty sure I talked about this before, and I've written about it before and everything, but the scene on Cloud City where R2 lays down the smoke cover, music swells, bolts are flying by him, he comes out of the fog, and the everything's going on, will actually bring me to the verge of tears every single time. Not because I'm afraid R2 is going to die. Now, I know how everything's going to work, but it's such a magnificently heroic moment for this little rolling trash can, and I just love it. So, but I was saying I'm going to leapfrog past R2 here, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one of the ones that I think is not one that comes to people's minds right away. And when I think of droids, I actually wind up thinking of the tactical droid in the Clone Wars. And it's one of those things where I think one of the reasons I love the tactical droid so much is because it's so easy to look at the tactical droid and say in your brain, well, why did I not see that in the movies? Why did I not see a tactical droid in the movies? And I know that from a practical standpoint, it's because they didn't think of it until the show came around. But at the same time, it is something so unique to the Clone Wars and then Rebels that it makes such perfect sense. And what I love about the tactical droid is it supports that idea I was talking about earlier of the evolutionary principle. That while droids might not evolve the way that humans and life on Earth did and that sort of thing, the tactical droid is still an evolution of the battle droid. It is relatively intelligent compared to other droids. It has the ability to plan and strategize and all of those sorts of things. And I think it's also just a really neat concept to have this this droid that is a battlefield commander directing the troops, that then plays into this subtle storyline of why Grievous then comes around. Is Grievous is a droid general, and he has aspects of both about him, where he's the big machine, but he has, and so Grievous becomes almost this bridge between the tactical droid and Anakin, turning into Vader. And so I think that the tactical droid, I think, is one that shouldn't be slept on. I think it's a really interesting, really unique.
I agree with that.
Really,
no, I 100% agree.
And rewarding
it's such an
concept
interesting choice, and I
come
do
out of
think
Star
it's
Wars.
A really fun choice. It's funny that you mentioned that, because one of the things I had on my list was the B1. Like, it's just because of what it becomes, especially in the Clone Wars. The characterizations you give to those droids, even just think of it in the Clone Wars movie where, the guy, the B1 off the temple at Teth, and he's like, why? and it just because Ventress has pushed him off, and it's just. It's maybe one of the funniest moments, altering ethical questions, like that kind of thing, or morality questions, and it's hysterical, right? So I think they do just such a good job with that, and the humor with it's so funny. So kind of an off-the-wall choice for me there would be the B1.
I think that's a totally valid choice. I mean, you talk about the why. I got such a chuckle, and I still get such a chuckle in episode 3 when the B1 hands the lightsabers to Grievous, and he just takes them, and as he's walking by, you just hear him mutter, "You're welcome." Like, it's just this, it's this simple interaction, which, I think is really cool. I like that you picked the B1, because I think the B1 I think the B1 gets overlooked. I do. By the casual fan. I really wish I could show episodes of the Clone Wars. Like, I would love it if Disney Plus would make a collection of Clone Wars episodes that highlights the B1, that gives you the best moments of the B1, so that you could have like a 10 episode arc, and it wouldn't necessarily be a story, but you could see these highlights of their interactions and everything. So good choice. Really, really good choice. And I think also a really great choice because the B1 shows up in episode 1 as a non-thinking remote controlled unit. And then obviously it gets evolved in episode 2. It evolves a little more in episode 3. And then once they get to the Clone Wars, there's so much freedom for them to actually give these things personality and a uniqueness about them, while being, while sameness at the same time, so that we have this payoff in the final season of the Clone Wars when Mace Windu lands, among thousands of them and just says, "All right, I've killed a lot of you droids. I've destroyed a lot of you droids.
Right.
Can we just talk this out? Can we just not do this? I'm going to chop all of you in half." And it's such a wonderful payoff for those sorts of things. So B1's a great choice. Great choice. Great choice. Interesting thing is, on my list is a very non-thinking droid, a very fun droid, and that's the Buzz droids. I get such a kick out of them. I love the idea of Lucas reaching back into World War II lore and giving life to the legend of the Gremlin. And so I really like the Buzz droids.
Yeah, no, that's a great choice too, I think. I think one of the things that I really appreciate is the droids that we saw in other places. And one of the droids, I think, you've never played Knights of the Old Republic, but one of the droids that was just really funny was the HK-47, and he called humans meat bags because he was like an assassin droid, and he just had the funniest personality, and it just a great character. It was one of those things where they found a new way to characterize a droid that we really hadn't seen before, one who was kind of completely derogatory towards humans in every way, which that's funny, that had really never been done before in Star Wars. So I thought they did a great job with that. And it's one of those things like, you obviously have to play the game to get it. But it's a great character, and I know many people, Tristan Riddell from the Nerd Party here included, that that's a droid that stands out to them. So,
I have never played Knights of the Old Republic. I know I'm an apostate among Star Wars fans for that reason, but when you say HK-47, I think, oh, that what a wonderful tip of the hat to the AK-47. Which is a cute enough little tip there. I want to ask though, because you talk about the sort of disdain for humans or for organics sort of thing. Is Chopper a droid we should jump past because he's like R2, where it's just sort of a given that we love him? Or do you think that Chopper is a character that people don't love as much as they do other droid characters?
Oh, no. I think people love Chopper, and part of that is because I think people love Chopper's catness.
Yes.
In the sense that not Katniss from the Hunger Games, but
Chopper Everdeen.
yeah, exactly. May the odds be ever in your favor. But no, the fact that his personality is so different from R2. R2 was always the dog. He's always willing to help. He's always there at your side. And Chopper is the character who, legitimately does whatever he wants. In fact, he would put an entire mission at stake just because he wants a new leg arm.
Yes, that's true.
That's
true.
And there's in fact, I remember not really liking Chopper in the first season because he's just kind of a douche.
Oh,
as a character, and then he really grows on you as the seasons move on. But I think his personality was just so antithetical to what we saw in R2-D2 that it was perfect. You should not pass over him because I think he is a completely different type of character. And yet by that moment where you visit the Twi'lek home planet of Ryloth, and Chopper passes by the ship that crashed where Hera first meets him and then saves him, it's such a moving moment. So
yeah, it is. Okay, good. I'm glad we don't just jump past Chopper because I think the reason I do love Chopper, is because of the fact that I have owned cats. And one of the things that I've always enjoyed about cats is, dogs are hopelessly loyal. You could be Jeffrey Dahmer and your dog would still love you. And that's nice. And it's a loving relationship. It's a wonderful thing, but it's not the most gratifying. If somebody, it's always great to have another being love you unconditionally. But after a certain point, if you can get a cat to love you, you've truly accomplished something, because it's like having a person love you. Because if the cat is having a bad day, it's like Chopper, where you could ask Chopper, hey, could you do this for me? And Chopper would be like, the F, what? No, I don't want to do that. What are you talking about? I like that. I can respect that on a different level. And I think that's probably why I responded to Chopper so well.
Yeah. Well, and I think, that's one of the reasons that, all of these different droids with their personalities. And I think it's one of the reasons I really responded to, I think Taika Waititi and what he did for, IG-11 was so fantastic too, because again, you kind of have this droid who's really almost oblivious to the fact that he lives everything by the letter of the law, is so obnoxious to everybody else. And, he takes everything kind of literally, and just the fact that they could make that joke work about the self-destruct and it didn't feel overdone was a perfection in many ways. And part of that, I think, is that, that's Taika's performance. I also think that's Dave Filoni kind of learning from the Clone Wars and even in Rebels how to really make humor work in Star Wars, because it's always, and I've said this before, Star Wars humor always works best when it's kind of sarcastic humor, or humor like that where a character doesn't know they're being funny.
Yes.
And so I think The Mandalorian really excels in that type of humor, and IG-11 was definitely part of that.
Yes. I love IG-11. I think everybody loves IG-11. IG-11 is definitely, we were talking about this during the commentary of episode 8 of the first season of The Mandalorian. And what is absolutely crazy is, we talked about how do the magic hand thing, baby. Star Wars is, more than 40 years of existence, and we have a line immediately thrown in where it's in our lexicon as fans. And then for IG-11 to come in, and IG-11 is immediately endeared to everybody, to the point where I even have a bobblehead of IG-11, and I don't even like collecting bobbleheads. But it was the IG-11 thing that I liked that was cute, and I got it as a gift, and, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, IG-11's great. I think that to a lesser extent, even though he only appears in one episode, Zero, speaks to that same sort of thing, where he has one of the funniest moments. He's in one of the funniest moments in all of recent Star Wars, with the child thinking that his powers just blew up the droid, and you find out it's the Mandalorian shot him and everything. But it just reinforces what works so well, what you're saying about IG-11. The character doesn't know they're being funny. And that is what I think also works very well for C-3PO's prissiness. And I know that you don't like C-3PO particularly, and that is why you're a monster.
Yeah, it's true. I am. I'm going to name, too, another droid that comes from the video games. And very recently, one of the droids I really liked was the BD-1 droid from Jedi. Jedi Fallen Order. And one of the things that I thought was kind of fun about him as a droid, and again, they gave him kind of an animalistic characteristic, which was he kind of almost felt like basically a larger rodent, because like he could perch up on his shoulder. So it was almost like you had a cross between like a bird and a rodent kind of thing. Those things that like you carry with you very closely. He could perch on his back and everything as well. Mm-hmm. And so, it was that type of relationship that they had, which was really fun. And it was a fun design. It was very different. It was just kind of like this. It looked like this big projector head on these basically two legs, mm-hmm. and it was a really inventive design. So it wasn't like, I felt like retreading a lot of things we'd seen before. And he had a fun little personality. He had the kind of the cute beeps and boops that we all love from like an R2 or a BB-8. But this one, I just thought, again, you're kind of pulling from our pet language as humans to create this character to which we all kind of go, aw, isn't that cute? And the reason we do that is because we are so easily able to anthropomorphize the character from things that we have experience with. We had hamsters growing up and stuff like that. So, this feels in that same vein.
Yeah, and the thing is, what's interesting is, we're sort of rounding third here. So I'm going to mention in passing that I have had for my entire, honestly, almost my entire life, because I, was around when Return of the Jedi got released in theaters and everything. But 8D8 and EV9D9 have been two droids that have fascinated me since 1983. Because the idea of, first off, a bureaucratic, almost, servant assigning droid was fascinating in EV99. But then I was always, from the moment I first saw 8D8, the one torturing the power droid in Jabba's dungeon, I was always fascinated because the design, the droid looks like the Grim Reaper, and tortures other droids. And I have always been fascinated by that concept, that there would be a droid torturing other droids. Because again, when you get into that idea that L337 really kicks the door open on, and I don't think you can have any droid conversation without mentioning L337, right? L3 I love, but L3 is an extension of that briefest of moments in Return of the Jedi where you see a droid that can torture another droid, because it speaks to that idea of an intellectual hierarchy and almost a droid morality that can exist. And that it's that seed there that I think grows out into L3. And because L3 is magnificent, is a terrific droid character. And Phoebe Waller-Bridge does a wonderful job with the physicality and the effects. You want to talk about effects, and you talk about K2. What they accomplished with L3 was insane. Like it still blows my mind just on the work they did with L3, that Solo doesn't get more respect for the incredible effects work that that the crew did with that. It's just
it's
nuts.
like the Rodney Dangerfield of Star Wars films. I get no respect.
Yes. And while we sit here and we have this discussion, and I love L3. I will love L3. She will always be in, my favorite droids collection. The awkward thing I want to land on, and we've touched on this before. I know the answer from my perspective. What is it that the sequel trilogy gets wrong with droids? Because they do. And I've offered this my thoughts on it before, but I want to get your thoughts. What does the sequel trilogy get wrong?
I think part of it, well, one, I like BB-8 a lot as a character. I think he's really fun. I think the problem with BB-8 is, one, a lot of the things he gets to do in the second sequel movie does not help at all because they're so ridiculous. The plugging up the holes thing and then being turned into a coins machine, a slot machine, and then shooting those coins out at other people. That doesn't help. I also think that the main problem is that he's basically just there to be the new R2-D2 instead of being his own character. BB-8 and R2-D2 are so similar in their personalities. And actually, I would say that's where I think that a droid that does not get enough respect is Dio. And whether you really like the character or you think it's worth anything, I thought the idea of a droid who has been mistreated, and again, this is where you go into the pet thing. My wife works at a vet's office, and anytime if you have a pet who, and they have them, the rescues that are very shy, very timid, they've been mistreated, and they don't really like a lot of new people and all those kind of things. And so that I thought was really interesting because you have a droid who has a completely different personality than we've seen before, again, where it's like, this is a droid who doesn't like people very much because of what's happened to him, and it takes him a while to warm up to people, and he has to be treated well before he's going to like you or maybe even trust you. And so all of that I thought was a really interesting idea, and many of the ways that, I think L3 brought new ideas. I think Dio brought new ideas. The problem is that, again, it's just too much, right? You've got too many things going on, and whereas you have a good idea, I think, it gets lost in everything else that's going on in that movie. So for me, the droids we see are either straight up replacements for ones we already have. I mean, we literally cover R2-D2 with a blanket in the corner and make him shut off for no good reason that we still have never really truly explained. And other than maybe he's got droid melancholy because, Luke's gone. Yeah, I don't know. So, and can I just say, R2-D2 maybe has the best droid moment in the sequel trilogy when he pulls out the recording from Leia, and Luke's like, cheap move, and it's like, it's a great moment though. R2-D2 is being that cheeky self that he's always known to be. He basically gives Luke an F you and tells him, you really think you should be sitting here? Well, let me show you why you shouldn't be sitting here, you big dope. That's the one movie in that movie that was the one moment in the movie that really rings true. So, to me, that's the thing that just makes the sequel trilogy lack anything super special. The things that they do try to do, I think, they're just lost in the malaise of story. And otherwise, we've seen those type of droids before, so it's not new, so.
Well, I think that L3 in Solo raises an expectation for droid characters now, and to go from that to suddenly everything, there's this odd lack of rhythm because of the release schedules. And what's interesting is that in episode 7, BB-8's cute enough. I like BB-8, but he's sort of, R2-D2, the next generation. Okay, that's fine. And then you get K2 and you're like, oh, okay, this is new. This is sort of like 3PO, but not prissy, complainer.
No, he's just like the sarcastic
Right.
3PO.
Yeah.
Like, like he's
Right. Then you have episode 8 where, again, everybody's sort of like, well, this is the droids that we understood growing up. And then you have L3, and that just completely opens up everything, because it opens up different conversations about droid rights and about and about how do you treat sentient machines and all of those sorts of things. And then you go back again in episode 9, and the droids aren't as evolved, if you will. And it's just sort of an odd thing. Like, it doesn't make, I think, for, I don't know, it just breaks the flow. Whereas you have a flow and an evolution in terms of release order, where the understanding of droids is, or, artificial life and artificial intelligence, grows over time with our understanding and expectation of it. The sequels are anachronistic within Disney's own release cycle, that they don't do anything to progress things or to understand artificial intelligence in a different way.
Well, the thing I would say too, just looking all the way back, when we look at the droids that we get in Star Wars from the very beginning, droids have a purpose, and the original purpose for the original trilogy is that those droids are characters through whose eyes were seeing the saga, and George is obviously pulling from Kurosawa. He's using obviously the Hidden Fortress and those characters that you kind of see the entire story through. And every subsequent film that adds new droids or something, they're kind of adding something to what we know of droids. They're and so they're used for those purposes. And so I truly think that this is where, in many ways, when you sit down to write a Star Wars story, you need purpose and structure and understanding of the story that you're trying to tell. And that's just really where it comes down to the sequel trilogies we talked about. It doesn't have the focus. It doesn't have the purpose of the story from start to finish. So it doesn't actually know, really, for the most part, how its droid characters fit in and the reason you would have them and the type of droids that you would want and all of those things. And I think that's really probably the biggest thing. You gotta know the reason you have every character in your film and the purpose it serves, and that if you pulled that character out, there's no other way for that to happen. And so. I don't think for much of the sequel trilogy that's as important as something like L3 and Solo, or the type of character K2SO is and the part that he plays in the heist.
Absolutely.
And all, and so and even again just the role of the droids we see, 3PO, even when you look back at the prequels and introducing those characters to everybody, and then what they come to mean to the different characters throughout the series, with 3PO and his connection with Anakin, him being the maker, the relationship that he, basically, Han had Chewie, his best friend, the dog, in the co-pilot seat. Anakin has R2, his dog character, in the cockpit behind him in the droid slot on his ship. So it's that type of relationship, and you just keep building with these things and playing around with them, but again, there's a real focus and a reason for them to be there.
Yep. Well, it's always interesting talking about droids. I think it's interesting for us to have shared our favorites, our first come to minds when we discuss droids here. But if anybody wants to reach out to you and discuss droids further or their importance to Star Wars, where can they find you online?
Yeah, you can hit me up personally on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Vero under the name MattRushing02. You can also follow me at the 602 Club, which is the show account for the show that I do on the TFM network, which is our General Geek Show, where we talk about all of the fandoms we love. John, you've been over there recently talking about some great things, so people can check that out. Over there, I'm also doing Literary Treks and The Orb do those with Chris Jones. The Literary Treks is about the books and the comics of Star Trek, and The Orb is about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And then here on this network, I do Owlpost with Drea Kaufman as we talk about Harry Potter each and every week, one chapter at a time. But John, that's where everybody can find me. What else have you got going on? Where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on your social network of choice as Kessel Junkie, KESSELJUNKIE. Like I said, Vero, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. That's, Instagram even. You can find me there. You can also find me over on kesseljunkie.com, sharing writings, drawings, and other thoughts, those sorts of things. And you can find me here on the Nerd Party Network, co-hosting some archived shows, most recent one being House of Fincher, which is a show exploring the works of David Fincher in the run-up to the release of his Netflix film, Mank. But I can tell you, they have one heck of a Jedi party going on back at the temple right now. And Master Rushing, I really want to get back there before somebody accidentally stumbles into my room and pukes in the corner again. So I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.